Time travel. In a show like SpongeBob where they don't follow the lore, it probably doesn't matter. But then there's moments like this where Squidward casually messes with the timeline and nothing changes. What's worse is that there's so many moments like this and no one talks about them, so I thought I'd be the first one. Let's look at the impact time travel has on the SpongeBob universe, starting off with the episode. Now I'm pretty sure we all know what happened in this episode. Squidward didn't want to go jellyfishing with SpongeBob and Patrick, so he snuck into the Krusty Krab. But when the two followed him in there, he hid inside the freezer. After they left, he couldn't open the door and ended up freezing for 2,000 years. Somehow, he ended up surviving. And once he realized he traveled to the future, he took the Krusty Krab time machine, but instead of going back to where he was from, he went to prehistoric Bikini Bottom so he could escape SpongeBob and Patrick. Well, he must have been pretty unlucky because he ended up meeting their ancestors. They started being weird, so he runs away and ends up nowhere. After realizing that he needs people, he somehow ends up in the time machine and travels to the present, and the episode ends. So there's so much Squidward did right here that we just have to talk about. Let's start with the future. So Squidward traveled to the future and actually did a bunch of things that could change the world. Apart from stealing a time machine, which let's be honest, no one cares about, he also learned a lot. Like he learns that the future is Chrome and SpongeBob and Patrick are robots. He also learns that time travel exists in the future. This info about the future could totally change the decisions Squidward makes. But that's not all. If he wanted, he could help invent a time machine early. And while he never did that, he did have access to a fully working time machine in the present by the end of the episode. So it's not crazy to think he would go around spreading this information. Luckily, it's Squidward, so he couldn't care less. Now there wasn't a whole lot going on in the future. After all, you can't change much about the present by changing the future. Luckily, he also went to the past. So immediately, I'm sure a lot of you know about how Squidward invented jellyfishing. Basically, to calm down the prehistoric SpongeBob and Patrick, he made jellyfishing nets for them. But this leads to a question: where did jellyfishing originate from? Because Squidward learned it in the present, but all accounts of jellyfishing are going to trace right back to Squidward, who taught it to the prehistoric fish. Well, this leads to something known as the bootstrap paradox, and you'll be hearing a lot about it as the video goes on. Basically, imagine that you went to Da Vinci, who's this guy, and gave him his life's work. He publishes it under his name, and centuries later, you get a hold of his work and decide to give it to him. So where did the work come from? You got it from Da Vinci, who gave it to you. Basically, there's no origin point. That's why it's a paradox. In a similar way, jellyfishing goes back to Squidward, who learned it in the modern times. So there's no way to determine when it began. But that's not even the biggest thing Squidward did. Apart from teaching them jellyfishing, he also talked around them and even introduced them to music. This most likely sped up their development by centuries, leading them to talking like modern fish way before they're supposed to. And this leads to another paradox known as the pedestrian paradox. Basically, it means that an event in the past is both the cause and effect of an event in the future, therefore creating a loop. In other words, because Squidward influenced the prehistorics in language and music, modern fish can talk and play music, which otherwise would have happened much later, if not at all, had Squidward not traveled to the past and did what he did. And that's pretty crazy. You know, Squidward speeding up modern communication and music. But there's something bigger in this episode, something everyone missed. After playing his music, the prehistorics start attacking him for torturing them. In a panic, he ran into the time machine and broke it. But instead of being trapped in the past forever, he goes to this weird place. Now, a lot of fans think that he ended up in purgatory or died or something, but that's not even close to what happened here. When he went into the time machine, it was set to the past. You know, because he was in the past. But after he broke it, he accidentally set it to the future. What if this is way far into the future, like the end of the universe? That would explain why there's nothing there. But it doesn't really impact the SpongeBob universe, and we can't really even prove it, so there's not much to end on. Overall, this is probably one of the most impactful episodes in the entire show. Squidward not only gets valuable information about the future, but he also single-handedly speeds up communication and music while getting himself into some paradoxes. Let's also not forget that he technically invented jellyfishing, causing another paradox. But it all ended with him probably going way into the future after the universe ended, only to come back through sheer luck. This episode definitely had a bigger impact than... Now you would assume that a nearly 24-minute special episode would have a bigger impact on the show than a random season 1 SpongeBob episode. But you'd be wrong. See, most of this episode is just a medieval story. Like SpongeBob and Patrick randomly end up in the medieval times. Then they just get sent to prison where King Krabs wants to execute them. But Pearl, who's a princess, reminds him of the prophecy and how the two are supposed to save the kingdom. Then Plankton kidnaps Pearl and Krabs sends the two, including Squidly, to rescue her. They do a bunch of random things, including beating Sandy with karate, and eventually get to his evil tower. They go to fight him, but end up losing to the giant jellyfish. But don't worry, SpongeBob's got a jellyfishing net. It's gonna be fine. Yeah, it didn't work out. So in their dying moments, they want to enjoy a Krabby Patty, but the jellyfish takes it and loves it. So it decides to listen to SpongeBob, who will make more patties for it. But as the episode ends, we get one of the most controversial endings in the entire show. See, it turns out that all of this was a dream from their jousting accident, so that would mean that all that we just saw is not canon. Well, some fans like to mention Squidly showing up in the end, and how that's the writers hinting towards the episode somehow being canon. They claim that the two really did go to the past and have an impact. But there's one thing people don't realize: the direction they fell. See, after being pushed off the seahorse, SpongeBob and Patrick fell behind them, clearly away from Squidly. So then, how did Squidly end up under Patrick in the end? Now, I know what a lot of you are gonna say. In a show where characters can possibly travel to the past by thinking about it, why does physics even matter? And you know what? You're right. But it's still a valid argument. Squidly was nowhere near them, so it wouldn't make sense for him to magically be under Patrick. Now, even if this episode is somehow canon, the only real interesting thing is the paradox with the Krabby Patties. And I'm sure a lot of you guessed it right, it's the bootstrap paradox. Basically, SpongeBob introduced Krabby Patties to a medieval Mr. Krabs, who got the idea about selling them for a profit. Here, it's sorta implied that this is where the idea of the Krabby Patty started. But it was SpongeBob who gave medieval Krabs the idea. The same SpongeBob who learned from the Krusty Krab and Mr. Krabs centuries later. This creates a paradox of where the Krabby Patties even originated from. Was it SpongeBob who learned from Mr. Krabs, or was it King Krabs who learned from SpongeBob? But luckily, the entire episode is a dream, so we don't have to worry about it. Honestly, a lot of you are probably wondering why I even bothered talking about this episode, but if I didn't, I guarantee 80% of the comments would just be asking about this, so I knew I had to mention it. Now, a lot of you may have watched this episode, but I guarantee most of you have never heard of... So Delivery of Doom is a season 15 episode that I just know a lot of you have never heard of. It's kinda like pizza delivery, but instead of nature, SpongeBob's dealing with villains. Basically, the Krusty Krab is delivering, and if any delivery is over 10 minutes, then it's free. So the villains decide to order and then stall the delivery boy so they can get a free meal. That's pretty much the entire episode. SpongeBob just defeats a villain and then moves on to face the next one. Somehow, he actually gets to Man Ray, who made the order, with 10 seconds left. But Man Ray just waits it out and gets the order for free. Well, SpongeBob is sad and he helps this elephant superhero that Man Ray was torturing. The elephant appreciates this act and actually helps SpongeBob by traveling back 1 minute and 17 seconds, therefore getting the delivery on time. But it turns out that the villains are broke and can't afford to pay. So SpongeBob pays for them and also gets Man Ray's autograph. The episode ends with the villains losing their food because of the elephant superhero. Now, I know we just talked about an episode where nothing really happened, but this one actually takes the cake for the least amount of plot. I bet you I'll talk about this episode in like 2 minutes total. Because it was a simple trip back in time. It's just a redo. All that really changes is that SpongeBob is on time. He even ended up paying for their meal, which he would have anyways. If they didn't travel back in time, the villains would have kept their meal. But there still is one thing that's interesting that resulted from all this. See, because SpongeBob traveled back in time, he got Man Ray's signature he otherwise would have never gotten. It's kinda interesting because in an alternate universe, that autograph never existed. But that's literally all there is to talk about. I mean, we could mention how SpongeBob didn't show up, but they did go pretty far back in time, so I think SpongeBob was still gonna show up, like the SpongeBob from before. Other than that, there's literally nothing to talk about. The time traveling happened in the last 2 minutes of this episode, so there honestly isn't much to say. But I still wanted to include this because a lot of y'all don't watch season 15, so it's a nice new story to talk about. Now I know the past few have been kinda boring, but trust me, this next one is infinitely more interesting. I'm talking about the episode. So if you don't main the show or my channel, which honestly I don't blame you, then you're probably wondering what this episode even is. Well, Kitchen Sponge is actually a Camp Coral episode. And before you click off, this episode in its entirety explains how Camp Coral is actually canon. The entire thing is also the third part of my Mr. Krabs theory, so check that out if you want. Basically, in the episode, Mr. Krabs wants Plankton to cook better food, and long story short, he gets SpongeBob to help him. SpongeBob can't cook at the start, but then he randomly figures it out and actually makes good food. But the food is too expensive, so Krabs wants to get rid of it. So to compensate, SpongeBob gives him this burger, and Krabs loves it. He replaces the entire menu just to sell the burger. In all of this, Plankton tastes the burger and has the great idea to take over the world with it. Long story short, Plankton wants to steal the formula and there's this big run chase with SpongeBob following him. But right as he's about to run away with it, Sandy accidentally burns the formula with her automatic campfire. Now this is where we get to the good stuff. It turns out older Sandy actually had her younger self destroy the formula and this was all part of her plan. Now while there's no actual time travel, this conversation reveals a ton. The first thing is that it's clear that this isn't their first time talking. They seem to know each other pretty well, almost like they've talked before. Now it may not seem like it, but this actually has huge implications. Because Sandy and her younger self talked to each other before, it led to some things changing. Somehow, some way, her talking to her younger self led to SpongeBob discovering the Krabby Patty formula early. In that timeline, SpongeBob discovered the formula, but there was no one to stop Plankton, so he took over. Because Sandy messed up, she asked her younger self to go to Camp Coral and stop Plankton from taking over. And this tiny change in the timeline leads to major changes like SpongeBob meeting Sandy and Squidward way before he's supposed to. But this isn't even the biggest thing Sandy did by simply talking to her past self. See, because SpongeBob discovered the formula before he was supposed to, Krabs also got access to the formula. Well, it turns out he also tried it and he loved it. Krabs was a camp counselor for some reason, despite making the formula when he was a kid. Now, if you really want to understand what's going on, then just go watch my Mr. Krabs theory. But long story short, he gave up the formula to pursue his passions. But once he tried the formula again, something in his mind clicked, and he opened the Krusty Krab. So, in a way, Sandy's the reason the Krusty Krab exists. It's another example of the bootstrap paradox, technically. Because SpongeBob led to Krabs getting the formula and therefore opening the Krusty Krab. But he got that information because Sandy talked to herself and caused changes in time. So technically, there's no real origin of the Krusty Krab. All in all, Sandy simply talking to her younger self had a huge impact. Not only did she change time, leading to Plankton taking over the world, but when trying to fix it, she changed the past by sending her younger self to Camp Coral, changing their original meeting as adults. But if this wasn't enough, she also led to the Krusty Krab existing and also caused a paradox in her spare time. She really did a ton. So what did we learn today, kids? Well, if you actually made it to the end, then it's pretty clear. Time travel is dangerous. Sometimes it's as simple as what SpongeBob did in Delivery of Doom, but most of the time, one wrong step and you've probably destroyed the entire universe. Now obviously there are a ton more episodes where they time travel, but I could never fit it in one video. So if you guys want a part 2, then just get this video to at least 1,000 likes. To be honest, I don't really care if we get to the likes or not, I'm probably still gonna make a part 2. This topic is just really interesting. I'll see you guys in the next one.